today we're going to be talking about some Superflex Dynasty trade values. We got some players that we're going to talk about. One of us is buying, one of us is selling. So let's start with Pittsburgh Steelers running back Najee Harris. I'm going to buy. He's an annual 1,000-yard rusher. I think he's going to thrive in Arthur Smith's offense. You had alluded to this before, Nate. Two things can be true. Somebody could be a good offensive coordinator and a bad head coach. We see that all the time with coordinators. Check this out. He averaged 11.5 fantasy points per game in 2023. He's also never missed a game in his career. That is the type of reliability I want in a running back position. At this point, he went from most likely the RB1 on your team to like maybe an RB2, flex play, RB3, something like that. Last 3 weeks of the season, Nate, 19 carries for 78 yards, a touchdown, 27 for 122 and 2 touchdowns, 26 for 112 and 1. That is how you want to finish the season. Matt Canadia is long gone. Arthur Smith is in. Russell Wilson's in too. Interesting to see how that goes. Yeah. Check out his value right now. He's valued around players like a mid-second round pick. That's not a player, but that's a pick. Matthew Stafford. You could do Najee Harris in like a 24th, 4th for maybe Brian Robinson in a 24th, 3rd, or move Brian Robinson in the 3rd to get Harris in the 4th. Nate, you're selling. So let's see if we can tell me the why and then see if we can figure out a deal here.
All right. So as someone who's been a Najee supporter throughout his entire career, going back to college, it's tough for me to sell Najee, but I went and kind of dug into the stats and, what this Arthur Smith offense is going to look like in Pittsburgh. Taking a look at what Arthur Smith did the past 3 years with the Atlanta Falcons and how he split that backfield up, it has been pretty much a 50-50 split with a slight 55-45 lean maybe sometimes between the running backs. So as much as I love Najee Harris, I think he'll get most of the goal line touches as long as that offense can get to the goal line pretty often. I think Jaylen Warren's going to be very, very involved in this offense next year. Najee did break 1,000 yards last year, but he only had 4 yards per carry, and Jaylen Warren had over 5.2 yards per carry. And going back to the Atlanta Falcons, in 2023, Bijan had 53% of the carries between him and Tyler Algier. So Algier had the other 47%, so pretty close to 50 there. Not to mention how, Jaylen Warren just factors as a better pass catcher right now than Najee Harris. The Falcons running backs last year, Mike, saw 121 targets. That is a lot of opportunities for the running backs to catch passes and score fantasy points for us. Going back into 2022, Tyler Algier had 49% of the running back carries. Cordell Patterson and Caleb Huntley combined for 51%. So once again, a pretty 50-50 split there. Going back to 2021, when you have Cordell Patterson and then you have the three-headed monster, I guess, of Mike Davis, Wayne Gallman, and Andre Allison, all kind of playing that kind of in-between the tackles runner. That split right there was 55-45, leaning towards the inside the tackle runner. So I do think Najee Harris is probably going to have that 55%. Maybe he gets up to 60, but I think Jaylen Warren's going to be heavily involved in this offense. So it does give me some pause to continue to buy into Najee Harris, who's on the last year of his rookie contract, as you know. So you're going to need some touchdown luck if he really wants to come through and score some fantasy points for us this year. But he is reliable, like you said, hasn't really missed any games. Najee Harris, I could sell him for a second-round pick if it's a pick this year. Maybe I'm replacing that with Trey Benson. Maybe I have some running back depth. It's hard to move on from a running back who I think is going to score at least decent fantasy points. I think he can certainly be an RB2 this year, top 24, top 20. Matthew Stafford, though, if I need a quarterback, maybe I am looking to move Najee Harris for a quarterback of that kind of caliber, to kind of fill up my last super flex spot. It's just always hard to move running backs if you're a contending team. Like I said, I think Najee is a top 20 guy, top 24 guy. So
I agree. It's really hard to move running backs when you're contending. You want those points, in that position, as you're well aware of, is just one that fluctuates so wildly. But the 204 for doing that virtual handshake. Let's move on to a player who has yet to step foot on an NFL field, and that is Carolina Panthers running back Jonathon Brooks. Nate, you're buying. Tell me why. Tell me for how much.
Yes, and I love me some Jonathon Brooks. So with Jonathon Brooks here, he's drafted with a lot of opportunity in front of him. He was a top 50 pick, which we always love top 50 picks for fantasy football. There's a really good hit rate for those guys. Miles Sanders, really disappointed last year, 3.3 yards per carry. Didn't even have 500 yards on the season, Mike. Chuba, he did perform well when he was called upon, but still he averaged less than 4 yards per carry, 3.8 on the season. So Jonathon Brooks has all the opportunity, and he's going to be healthy by training camp, so he has time to ramp up, feel more comfortable on that knee. And maybe it's not at first. I don't know if week 1 he's going to have 25 touches. I don't necessarily expect that. But I think by midseason, Jonathon Brooks is going to be the main workhorse for this running back backfield. I think he's going to be the main guy. And I'm buying into the Panthers offense. I like the additions they've made. They drafted Xavier Legette. They drafted Jatavion Sanders on top of Jonathon Brooks as well. They've tried to create pieces around Bryce Young, their franchise quarterback. They brought in Deontay Johnson, who I love. So this offense has really become much more exciting to me. And I think a lot of the pieces right now are values. So because of that, I'm buying into the Panthers offense. Jonathon Brooks is one of those guys I'm buying into. Very comfortable right now, picking him up at the 109, 110. I've already drafted a couple shares myself. If I need to, move a player for him, can I move Rashad White, Isaiah Pacheco? If I need to add, like a third round pick on top of that to make it happen, I'm more than happy to, because I think Jonathon Brooks is a very talented running back. And as long as that Panthers offense comes together at all, I think he's going to score a lot of fantasy points for us.
I don't know if you have to add right now. I mean, we're talking, this is a guy who is going to a worse offense than what a player like Rashad White was. Rashad White, without looking, was
RB4 last year.
Yeah, running back 4 on the year. So really, it should be Rashad White for Jonathon Brooks. Plus, in my opinion, and look, people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. But the way I see it is this: you're taking proven production, a guy who has a potential to be a top 10 running back again. Do we really want to replace that with a rookie who, then the reason why I'm selling, and I like Jonathon Brooks, but I can either only buy or sell. The backfield is crowded. And look, Miles Sanders, inefficient and not good last year. Chuba Hubbard, not super efficient, but these guys are there. These guys are veterans, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is, I believe Chuba Hubbard is on the last year of his rookie deal. They could just run the wheels off this guy. He ain't coming back. Why would he? You got Jonathon Brooks waiting in the wing. Let's bring him along slowly. So coming off of an injury, really only 1 year of college production.
Mike, something else to add to your point here is I was looking last night, what's Miles Sanders' contract look like? They cannot cut him. They would owe like $13 million in dead cap. Next year they can move on from him, but he's there this year unless they trade him.
And that's always a possibility. We see players get hurt in training camp all the time. There's some teams that have not so great. Maybe Jahmyr White isn't looking so good. And all of a sudden, Miles Sanders is out in Las Vegas. You never know. Anything could happen. That being said, if you offered me Rashad White or Isaiah Pacheco for Jonathon Brooks, yeah, I'd be okay with that, especially if I'm a contending team.
Yeah, I understand that because, I don't think Jonathon Brooks is going to put up top 12 numbers this year.
No, and if not, then I would just probably stick with Jonathon Brooks. So let's move on, Nate. And let's talk about Seattle Seahawks running back Kenneth Walker. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to buy him. The Seattle Seahawks, not good last year. But I saw some things about Kenneth Walker that kind of surprised me a little bit. 6th in the NFL in stuffed runs and regularly faced stacked boxes. But he was also number 2 in juke rate and number 3 in evaded tackles. So the fact of the matter is the odds were literally stacked against him. And still, he was productive when he was able to. 4.4 career yards per carry. I'm excited to see what he looks like with a healthy and upgraded quarterback room. Healthy Geno Smith would be a good thing. And I do think that Sam Howell, if Geno Smith can't go, is an improvement over Drew Lock. I'm probably not buying Zach Charbonnet as well. Bob had that question on here. Don't want to buy Zach Charbonnet as well. And that was also applicable for Jalen Warren in the Najee Harris comp.
Yeah.
Not really. I don't like rostering 2 running backs from the same team. To be honest with you, you typically only start 1. I know Zach loves to handcuff, but these are what we would call high-end handcuffs, and you're going to want to start these guys. It's really hard to start 2 running backs from the same team.
Especially with a team like the Seahawks, where you have 3 good wide receivers. And I expect, I don't know exactly what their offense is going to look like this year, but if it looks anything similar to the Washington offense last year, because Ben Grubb is the new offensive coordinator there, they use a lot of 3 wide receiver sets because they have 3 good wide receivers. There's 3 good wide receivers in Seattle. I think this is going to be a good passing game this year. And I actually think Geno Smith is a good buy low right now. I know some people have been a little bit worried about his job, but Sam Howell's not coming for Geno's job. And Geno's actually on a pretty team-friendly deal for the next 2 years. If he can have a better year this year, which I think all he needs to do is just be protected better because he actually put up pretty good stats last year when he wasn't under pressure. So if that team can have a better offensive line, I think Geno would be a really good buy right now, just to go a little bit off topic.
But that being said, he's valued around players right now like Bryce Young, Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White. Apparently we want to trade these guys away. I did see a couple trades in fantasy calc. Here's one that I kind of like. If I could do this, you move Garrett Wilson and you get Kenneth Walker III and Devonta Smith.
I like that deal if you need a running back and you still want to keep a good wide receiver.
You're still getting, it's not like you're getting a trash wide receiver back, getting a guy who's, we're talking 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. You could pretty much lock that in. Kenneth Walker is also valued around the 111. And I saw another trade that I thought you would like too, Nate. This one might pull at your heartstrings. You're moving Isaiah Pacheco and you're getting Kenneth Walker III and Gus Edwards.
I love this deal.
I know you do, because you're a big Gus stan.
Yeah, Gus the bus, man.
I think he's going to have a good year out there in Los Angeles too. I'm excited about him. But Nate, you're selling. So tell me what you're thinking.
I am. Kenneth Walker, you put up some good stats there. And he did face a lot of stuff, stacked boxes, but he wasn't as explosive last year. Only 28% of his yards came on breakaway runs, which are runs of 15 yards or more. Compared to rookie year, 42%, Mike. Just a big drop off. I mean, going down over 50, just about 15 points there. So not as explosive. His passing game involvement has been stagnant. They brought Jack Charbonnet, as we mentioned all the time, to open up the screen game. He had 28 receptions his rookie year. He only had 29 last year. So it's not like that seems like it's going to go up anymore at all. So Kenneth Walker, as talented as he is to be kind of an all-around back, he's not being used in that way. So his just overall volume is limited. So as much as I like Kenneth Walker, I do think he can be efficient on his touches. I just wonder about the overall volume, especially if this offense is more passing. Is he going to give me the fantasy numbers that he's currently valued at right now? I know that he's a younger running back. He's going into just his third year in the league, but there's other running backs I would probably, put in the same tier as him that are ranked below him a good bit. So, if I can move Kenneth Walker for Bryce Young, one of the quarterbacks you mentioned, like I said, I'm buying back into the Panthers offense. I would move him. If you need a quarterback, go over to Bryce Young. Other than that, I'm not a big believer in Isaiah Pacheco. I don't mind the deal to go get Garrett Wilson if I'm the Devonta Smith, Kenneth Walker side trading away, if I really need a wide receiver and have running back depth. But that's a really hard one to move when you're moving a top 10 valued running back for a 2-for-1. It's always hard.
Yeah, you don't like those lopsided deals, I know.
No, it's tough for me.
Kenneth Walker also banged up last year too. Maybe that Seattle Seahawks offense as a whole. Check out what he was on the injury report for last year. Bruised shoulder, strained oblique, which caused him to lose 2 games, chest soreness and calf soreness. So starting from week 8 on, he was pretty banged up all year. Let's talk about our next player. Another one that I'm buying, and that is Detroit Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, I know when everybody wants to buy, they always want to buy low, but that's not always the case. You're buying high here for Jahmyr Gibbs, and I'll tell you why. He's very efficient with his touches, Nate. He averaged 5.2 yards per carry and 6.1 yards per reception. Check this out. He had 945 yards. This is regular season, not postseason. I did not include postseason because we only play fantasy in the regular season. Of his 945 total yards, 568 were after contact. That's 60% of his yards were after contact. Extremely good, just extremely efficient. But look, you're going to be paying up, okay? You can use Jahmyr Gibbs as kind of a tier down player if you want. You can go from Bijan Robinson to maybe Jahmyr Gibbs and like a third. I don't know if you could do a second, Nate. You could try.
Maybe. You could ask.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
I think it's reasonable to ask.
But this one, I think you could do Breece Hall for Jahmyr Gibbs in a second. Breece Hall still really highly ranked up there. Came back a lot of receptions last year. He's also valued right around the 105 for Jahmyr Gibbs. So he's a player that if I can buy in on, if you're really set on wide receiver, because wide receiver is like or 105 is like a good wide receiver range. If you're set there and you want to just go get a stud running back, if you can move the 105 for him, you haven't had your rookie draft yet. I don't hate that at all.
I love that. If you're going to get, I love Gibbs for anything up to the 103, honestly.
Yeah.
Once you get to the 101, 102, I'd probably rather have Caleb or Marvin. But after that, there's a lot of question marks with the quarterbacks just because they're not absolute stud quarterbacks where we know that they're going to be great. And then, I like the wide receivers, but they're going to take some time to really become elite fantasy assets. And Jahmyr Gibbs is young at a premier position. He's hard for me to sell, and I have to sell him in this situation. The only situation where I'm selling Jahmyr Gibbs is in these two situations where you brought up, where I'm upgrading my overall volume to Bijan to Breece Hall. Because, look, David Montgomery's still there. And David Montgomery is a really good running back. I think that's another guy that is a good value right now. He's 26, and everyone just thinks, oh, well, it's going to be Gibbs' backfield next year. Well, you look at David Montgomery, he's not declining. And he's actually playing really well, and he fits that Lions locker room, that culture, that team. I don't think it's going to be, well, he's just done next year. They're going to kick him to the curb. He might sign another deal there and be there another 2 years. I think Montgomery is going to be around the league for a while. So whether it's with the Lions or somewhere else, Montgomery's a really good player. He had 258 carries last year. So overall, this is really, affecting Gibbs' volume on the ground, but his efficiency, especially in the passing game, makes up for it. So if I can move Gibbs in a third for Bijan, Gibbs in a third for Breece Hall, I'm absolutely doing that just to lock in that a little bit more volume, a little bit more of consistency with those guys.
And I do want to be clear. I do think Jahmyr Gibbs, him and Devon Achane, I think they're kind of similar. And I'm not saying that they're tit for tat players, but I just think the way that they're going to be used and the amount of volume that they're going to get, they're both players that are extremely efficient when they're given chances. I don't think they're ever going to be bell cows for their team. There's always going to be someone there to spell them, but both are extremely efficient. And it's okay to not be the locked in number one at your position. You can still be really good and not be the number one. Gibbs, Achane, T. Higgins in the past. These are guys that have proven that they don't need to be the locked in number one. They could still get you a lot of fantasy points. Devonta Smith is another guy. Exactly. Nate, let's talk about another player that maybe nobody wants, but you have to buy.
Can't believe this.
See, this is what happens when the show sheet's ready to go and you're still on a beach in Mexico. And Nate, that is Tennessee Titans running back Tony Pollard. Looks like you're buying, my friend.
Yeah. It says I'm buying, but under that it says, would you rather buy Tajay Spears? And the answer is yes. I'd much rather buy Tajay Spears.
Actually, what it says is, do you want to buy Tajay Spears as well? You'd make a great politician. You're just twisting it to what you want to say.
Well, not as well, because I'm not. I guess I'm buying Tony Pollard here, but I'm not. I'm telling you that if you want to go get a piece of the Titans' backfield, it's not Tony Pollard. He was very inefficient last year. But Tajay Spears, who showed some efficiency on a much worse offense. The Dallas Cowboys were the fourth best offense in yards per game last year. Yeah. And the Tennessee Titans, 28th, Mike. So quite a big difference in these two offenses. Spears had 4.5 yards per carry, a 30% breakaway rate. Pollard, he was just a 4 yards per carry, his career low. His breakaway percentage was 21.6, under 3 yards after contact per attempt. Just really low numbers, poor numbers. Efficiency was down. You could see it on the field when you watched him. He just wasn't the same guy as he was before. Now he goes to Tennessee. I think he's definitely going to get volume there. It's going to be annoying for any Tajay Spears owners. But I think ultimately the guy that you're going to want out of this backfield is Spears. Caught a lot of passes last year, 52 to be exact. So if I can move Tony Pollard for Tajay Spears, I'm definitely going to be doing that. Otherwise, to go acquire Tajay Spears, I'm looking at players like Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley, Jameson Williams.
And I'll take Calvin Ridley. I'll take Jameson Williams because I am very much selling Tony Pollard. As you alluded to, was very inefficient in what many people will argue, and as you pointed to, were a better offense last year than the Dallas Cowboys compared to when he was just running back 2 with Ezekiel Elliott. And this guy, he may be better just as a 1B. Last year, 252 carries, which was the most of his career, 1,005 yards, 6 touchdowns, 4 yards per carry. Most receptions of his career with 55, but the lowest yards per reception of his career, 5.7. Could he make Tajay Spears the next Tony Pollard?
Maybe.
He's the lead guy with the volume. Tajay Spears maybe thrives on not having to be the guy. He also had the lowest breakaway percentage of his career, 22.8. Nate, he's 27.
It's old. It's old these days.
Like I said before, I'll take Calvin Ridley. I'll take Jameson Williams. I would consider Marquise Brown. I don't know, but I'd feel much, much better with Ridley and Jameson Williams.
I think Marquise is actually the highest ranked on Keep Trade Cut among those 3.
Really?
Chiefs offense, baby.
Yeah, that's true. We've always said beware of the good offense bumps. Let's get to the last one, Nate. I gave you the good one on this one.
Easy one.
San Francisco 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey, and you are buying.
I sure am, Mike, because at the end of the day, I want to win my fantasy league, and there's perhaps no better player than Christian McCaffrey that sets you up to do that. Last year, he scored 24.5 fantasy points per game, Mike. That was the most of any player across any position. That was more than Josh Allen, who was number 2, who scored just over 23 points per game. So no player even scored 24 points per game except for Christian McCaffrey. He is the elite game changer in your lineup. We talk about Tyreek Hill oftentimes as that guy that can have those explosive games that win you your week. Christian McCaffrey does that on a week in and week out basis. It is ridiculous. He's a cheat code for fantasy football. He has been for the past couple of years, and he's actually been a lot healthier with the 49ers, despite getting a ton of volume with him as well. When McCaffrey went over to the 49ers, I expected them to spell him quite a bit with Elijah Mitchell or Jordan Mason or whoever they had in the backfield. And last year, there was games when Christian McCaffrey was dominating that backfield, 90+% of the touches, sometimes all of them. And if that continues, he's just that player that is going to change the game for you, make you a contender no matter what the rest of your team looks like. And to get him, he is expensive, but he's the cheapest he's been anytime recently because he's getting a little bit older. So you'd have to move a guy like Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, one of these young studs that we're all excited about. You got to move one of them to go get a guy like Christian McCaffrey is a little bit older. But if you have the 103 or the 104 and you're a contending team that just needs a running back to really, stamp your spot as the best team in the league, as great as Malik Neighbors might be as your wide receiver 5, it might be the move to go get Christian McCaffrey and win that pot. Because if you're playing in money leagues, it's nice to win the money at the end of the day rather than have a really, really nice wide receiver 5 on your team. If I can upgrade maybe from a guy like Rachaad White, James Cook, Kenneth Walker, I add like a late first in there. This sounds like a ridiculous deal, honestly, for Christian McCaffrey, who is such a game changer. Can I move James Cook in a late first? That seems light to me. But I would definitely start that conversation there. Maybe someone wants to get younger. Maybe someone isn't the contending team that they used to be when they had Christian McCaffrey for the past couple of years.
There's a big drop off too between him and the number 2 in fantasy points. Well, not huge, but he, like you said, at 24.5. Kyren Williams 21.3. Kyren Williams only played 12 games. So if there's a way that you could turn Kyren Williams into Christian McCaffrey, there's still Kyren Williams believers out there. And then after that, it goes Alvin Kamara and Raheem Mostert.
Mike, I purposely was not going to say who was the second running back in fantasy points per game because I didn't want to say it was Kyren Williams, but thanks for bringing that up.
That means that I'm going to sell, unfortunately. And this is one of those things. Maybe I'm coming off a championship. Most likely I am because I was averaging 24.5 fantasy points per game. And I want to kind of rebuild my roster a little bit here, right? An elite player, maximum value, amazing season. Let's move on. I believe he's 27 years old. But man, 272 carries, 1,459 yards, 14 touchdowns, 67 receptions, 564 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Still just chugging along. So, I see you have up here James Cook in the 110. I don't hate it. Get a little bit younger. I wish that pick was a little bit higher.
Or if it was Kenneth Walker in the 110, do you prefer that?
You
were buying him earlier.
Yeah, I know, but I actually think I prefer James Cook a little bit more than I prefer Kenneth Walker.
Too, actually.
I just feel with James Cook, you kind of know what you're going to get out of the Bills offense a little bit more right now than the Seattle offense. So if it was James Cook in the 110, maybe sprinkle something on top of it there a little bit. Could you do a third on top of that too? You're getting Christian McCaffrey, man.
Sure, I can do a third on top.
See that? There we go. And this is an attrition thing. I would prefer not to sell, but if you just won the championship and you want to start to retool your roster, Christian McCaffrey is a good guy to sell. Now, if you think you're locked in, still, you don't want to just be complacent and say, I'm going to run it back. It's really hard to not make any adjustments and say, I'm just going to run it back and we're going to be good. Until next time, everybody, we hope to see you in our Discord. We're giving away a week for free. Patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get yourself in there. The link is in the description. Until next time, for Nate, I'm Mike. Thank you for listening.